December wind cut through my barn like a sermon through a sinner. I'd come to check the grain bins before the next storm hit, lantern swinging, breath fogging white. The door hinge creaked, frost had locked it halfway. I shouldered through. That's when I saw her. A slip of a girl, maybe 11, filling a burlap sack with my oats. Her hands shook from cold, not guilt. I grabbed her wrist. Thieving from a man who'd feed you if you asked? She wrenched free, spit at my boots. The sound of it hitting leather echoed in the silence. Rather steal than beg from men like you. She bolted. A small metal disc tumbled from her coat pocket, ringing against the frozen dirt. I picked it up. The lantern caught the engraving. Abraham Whitlock, 14th Infantry, Shiloh. I followed her boot prints through the snow, down the ridge toward the valley. A half-mile out, I saw it. Smoke rising from a cabin that had no business standing. Through a cracked window, I counted 6 more children huddled around a dying fire. 7 orphans, 1 winter, and me standing in snow up to my knees holding a dead soldier's medal. I didn't knock. The door hung crooked on leather hinges, gaps wide enough to let wind whistle through. Inside, the smell hit me first. Burnt cornmeal and damp wool, the kind of poverty that settles into walls. 7 faces turned toward me. The girl who'd spit at me stepped in front of the youngest, a boy no more than 4 with fever-bright eyes. The others ranged between 9, 8, 6 maybe, thin as fence rails, every one. An old woman sat in a rocker, needle moving through a sock. She didn't look up. "We manage fine, Mr. Caldwell," she said, calm as church. "You can leave now." "Mrs. Whitlock, I presume." I held up the medal. "Your granddaughter dropped this." The girl, Nora, I'd learned, lunged for it. I held it higher. "Abraham earned that," the old woman said, setting down her mending. "Bled for it at Shiloh. Died from those wounds 6 years back, slower than any man should." An old man emerged from a back corner, wiping his hands on a rag. His fingers trembled like aspen leaves. He reached for a coffee cup on the table, nearly dropped it. The woman, Ruth, steadied it for him without comment. "Abel Whitlock," he said, not offering a hand. "You want your oats back? They're in the sack." I looked at the children, at the thin blankets, at the pot over the fire, where something that might have been soup bubbled with more water than substance. The floorboards had gaps you could see through to frozen ground. "Keep the oats," I said. "But I've got work needs doing, blacksmith work, $3 a week, if you're willing." Abel's jaw set. "Don't need charity." "Didn't offer any. I need a new hinge for my barn door, hinges for 6 stalls, and my anvil's got a crack, needs welding. You can smith or not. Makes no difference to me, but the work's there." Ruth stood, moved to a shelf, and pulled down a ledger book. Every page filled with tight script, numbers in neat columns. She opened to a marked page. "February 1st, she said, tapping a line. "Creek measurement due. Miss it, and we forfeit water rights to whoever files claim." I leaned closer. The handwriting was precise, accounting for every penny: firewood, flour, needles, lamp oil. At the bottom of the page, balance, 0.40 thries. "Abraham earned this land," Ruth continued, closing the book. "Papers don't feed children, though, so we make do." Nora watched me from across the room, eyes hard as creek stones. She held the youngest boy's hand. The child coughed, wet, rattling. I'd heard that sound before, on cattle with lung fever, on men dying slow. "Creek measurement," I said. "What's that mean?" "Territorial law," Abel muttered, finally getting the coffee cup to his mouth. His hands shook worse when he tried to set it down. "Water rights expire if you don't measure flow and file by deadline. Drummond's been circling like a buzzard, waiting for us to miss." "Silas Drummond?" "Owns half of Bent Creek now," Ruth said, "or claims to." Outside, wind moaned through the pines. Inside, the fire crackled, burning wood too green to give much heat. The youngest boy coughed again. Nora pulled him closer. "I'd buried my son 15 years back, 8 years old, thrown from a horse, neck broken clean. My wife followed 6 months later. Couldn't bear the silence. Couldn't bear me. I'd spent every year since then building walls, buying land, breeding cattle. Things that couldn't leave. Couldn't die if you managed them right. These children were none of my business." "I'll bring supplies tomorrow," I heard myself say. "For the smith work. You'll work it off at $3 a week." "We don't," Abel started. "It's not charity if you earn it," I cut him off. "And I need those hinges before snow gets worse." I turned for the door. Nora's voice stopped me, hard and bright. "Why?" I looked back. She stood like a soldier, shoulders square, protecting her line. Why what? Why do you care? You got your oats back. Got your medal. Why come inside? The answer was simple, and I didn't want to give it. Didn't want to crack the walls I'd spent 15 years mortaring shut. But those 7 faces were watching, and the youngest boy coughed again, and I remembered the sound my son made, that last breath. Because I buried a child once, I said. Won't watch more freeze if I can stop it. I left before anyone could respond. Behind me, I heard Ruth's voice, soft. Abel, get your tools ready. Outside, the temperature was dropping fast. I looked at the ledger date burned into my memory. February 1st, 6 weeks away. I pulled my coat tighter and started back up the ridge. Halfway there, I realized I still had Abraham Whitlock's medal in my pocket. Sunday came cold and clear. The church at Bent Creek was a plain box of whitewashed planks, bell tower leaning slightly west from wind. I'd paid Abel his first $3 that morning, coins that felt heavier than they should have in my palm. He'd taken them without comment, tucked them into a leather pouch worn soft with age. Ruth had watched from the doorway, Nora behind her like a shadow. Now I stood on the church steps, snow crunching under boots as folks filed past. Mrs. Hattie from the general store nodded, her eyes sharp as needles. Pastor Webb shook hands, his grip weak, his smile weaker. Abel and Ruth arrived in a borrowed wagon, children piled in the back under blankets. Nora climbed down first, helping the youngest, Timmy, I'd learned his name, who still had that cough. The others followed. Sarah, 9, Marcus, 8, Lucy and James, twins at 7, and Becky, 6. They filed into the back pew, quiet as mice. Too quiet. Children shouldn't know how to disappear like that. The service dragged. Pastor Webb talked about shepherds and flocks, about caring for the least among us. I watched the back of Nora's head, the way she kept Timmy tucked under her arm. The boy's cough echoed during the final hymn. After, I found Abel by the wagon. I pulled the $3 silver from my pocket. For next week's work, I said. Got those stall hinges ready? He nodded, pocketing the money. Mrs. Hattie drifted closer, pretending to adjust her gloves. Generous of you, Mr. Caldwell, she said, voice sweet as poison. Though folks are talking, those orphans are trespassing, you know, on territorial land. They're homesteading, I said, same as anyone. She smiled, teeth small and white. Perhaps you should ask Silas Drummond about that. As if summoned, Drummond appeared. He wore a wool coat too fine for church, boots polished to mirrors. His face was smooth, well-fed, the kind of man who'd never missed a meal or worried about missing one. He extended a hand. I took it. His grip was firm, practiced. Garrett Caldwell, he said. Good to see you supporting your neighbors. Christian charity and all. His eyes flicked to Abel. Though I wonder if Abel mentioned our arrangement. Abel's jaw tightened. Ruth's hand found his elbow. What arrangement? I asked. A debt, Drummond said, still smiling. $240, give or take. Been owed since '84. I've been patient, but patience has limits. I paid, Abel started. In goods and labor, yes. Drummond cut him off smoothly. But the contract specified currency. Legal tender. March 1st, Abel, or I'll have to pursue collection. You understand? He tipped his hat to Ruth, nodded to me, and walked away. His boots left clean prints in the snow. No mud, no wear. A man who never walked anywhere he didn't want to go. The wagon ride to the land office took 20 minutes. Ruth sat between Abel and me, the ledger book on her lap. Nora had climbed into the back, watching through the rear opening. Martin Boggs, the clerk, was a thin man with ink-stained fingers and a nervous habit of adjusting his spectacles. He looked up as we entered, and something flickered across his face. Fear, maybe, or guilt. Mrs. Whitlock, he said. Mr. Caldwell. Ruth opened the ledger, laid it on the counter. Every payment, Mr. Boggs. $240 paid between 1884 and 1888. Flour, preserved meat, cordwood, 3 months of smithing work at agreed rates, all documented. Boggs leaned over the ledger, fingers tracing the lines. His mouth twitched. I see, he said carefully. But Mrs. Whitlock, you understand, ledger entries aren't the same as legal receipts. Mr. Drummond has proper documentation. Let's see it, I said. Boggs hesitated, then pulled a folder from a drawer. Inside was a contract, printed neat, dated 1883. The amount, $240, due in full by March 1st, 1889. At the bottom, Abel's signature, or something close to it, The ink looked fresher than it should have. That's not, Abel began, but Ruth's hand on his arm stopped him. I leaned closer. Who owns the land their cabin sits on? Boggs adjusted his spectacles. Unclaimed territorial holding. Mr. Drummond purchased filing rights last month. Standard procedure. For unclaimed land. My voice was flat. Yes, sir. What about homestead claims? Military land grants? Boggs's face went carefully blank. Would need documentation. Registered documentation. Ruth's voice was soft, almost a whisper. Abraham's deed is at home. Never mattered after he died, but it might matter now. Drummond's shadow filled the doorway before he spoke. Ah, he said, stepping inside. The smell of bay rum cologne cut through the musty office. Discussing my property, are we? Discussing a debt that's already paid, I said. Drummond smiled. If it were paid, Mr. Caldwell, would I be here? Boggs, show them the contract. Already have. Then we're done. He turned to Abel. March 1st, old man. $240? Or the cabin's mine, along with whatever's in it. His eyes found Nora in the doorway. Children make good workers, I hear. Institutions always need them. The threat hung in the air like wood smoke. Outside, Ruth's hands shook as she climbed into the wagon. Not from cold, from rage so tightly controlled it vibrated through her bones. The deed, she said to me. Come to the cabin tomorrow. Abraham's deed is hidden in our Bible. Never registered because the lawyer said a widow couldn't file without her husband's signature verified. We didn't have witnesses. Abel's hands trembled worse than usual, fumbling with the reins. I took them from him. I'll drive, I said, and tomorrow I'll see that deed. Behind us, through the land office window, I saw Drummond watching. He raised one hand in a mockery of a wave. Whoa. The blizzard hit that night. By morning, snow had drifted halfway up the cabin door. I rode down anyway, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies I'd told myself were payment for smith work. Ruth met me at the door, flour dust on her hands. The smell of fresh bread, real bread, not cornmeal mush, filled the cabin. She'd used the flour I'd brought 2 days prior. Doc Cross is here, she said. Timmy's worse. Inside, a woman knelt beside a pallet where the youngest boy lay. Doc Annabelle Cross was maybe 44, with gray threading through dark hair pulled back severe. Her medical bag lay open, instruments gleaming in firelight. She pressed her ear to Timmy's chest, listening. The boy's breathing was shallow, wet. When he coughed, flecks of red stained the rag Ruth held. Doc Cross sat back on her heels. Pneumonia. He needs warmth, good food, and medicine I don't have enough of. Her eyes found mine. He'll die if they stay here through winter. We manage, Ruth said, but her voice cracked. You managed to keep them barely alive. Doc Cross stood, wiping her hands on a cloth. She moved to the table where I stood with Abel, lowered her voice. Mr. Caldwell, I need to show you something. She pulled a ledger from her bag, different from Ruth's, official-looking with county seals. Territorial orphan stipend, she explained. $2 per child per month for guardianship expenses. Ruth and Abel have 7 children, should be $14 monthly. She flipped pages. But look here. Payments go to Silas Drummond. He's been claiming guardian status, collecting the money for 18 months. I did the arithmetic. $252. Give or take. Doc Cross's mouth was a hard line. He's been pocketing it while these children starve. Can you testify to that? I asked. She met my eyes. I'll testify if you fight him, Caldwell. But understand, Drummond's got the law on paper. You'll need more than my word. Nora appeared in the doorway to the back room, holding a thick book. The family Bible, leather cracked with age. She set it on the table without a word. Abel opened it with trembling hands. Pressed between the pages of Genesis was a folded document, yellowed but intact. He spread it carefully on the table. Land grant deed, Abraham Whitlock, 160 acres per Homestead Act and military service provision, signed 1867. A survey map was attached, hand-drawn but detailed. It showed the creek, the cabin site, boundary markers, everything legal, everything proper. This proves ownership, I said, hope rising in my chest. Does it? Ruth's voice was bitter. Abraham died before he could register it. The lawyer said I couldn't file without his signature verified, needed witnesses we didn't have. 20 years this paper sat here, meaning nothing. I studied the map, the neat lines, the marked stakes. These boundary markers, are they still there? Buried under 20 years of dirt and snow was Celta, Abel said. His hands shook worse when he tried to refold the deed. Ruth took it from him, finished the job. Even if we found them, Drummond would claim we planted them fresh. I looked at those trembling hands. Shrapnel in his spine, Ruth had said. War wounds that got worse each year. No way he could forge new survey stakes, even if he wanted to. I'll take this to Judge Coates, I said. Circuit Court comes through in April. He's fair, mostly. Values frontier honor over territorial law technicalities. And what about March 1st? Ruth asked quietly. Drummond's debt is due 2 months before the judge arrives. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Timmy coughed in his sleep. Doc Cross packed her instruments, left a small bottle of morphine, all she could spare. After she left, I sat with the deed spread before me, tracing the survey lines with one finger. Abel worked his anvil outside despite the cold, hammering out the barn hinges I'd commissioned. The ring of metal on metal carried through the thin walls. Why didn't you register this? I asked Ruth. After Abraham died, even without verification, why not try? She poured coffee, her movements precise. Tried twice. First time, clerk said widow testimony wasn't sufficient. Second time, different clerk said the territorial surveyor's signature was required. By then, we had the children to feed. Fighting cost money we didn't have. Nora sat in the corner, teaching the younger ones their letters with a stick and a box of sand. She drew an A, showed Sarah how to copy it. The girl's tongue poked out in concentration. She's good with them, I said. Her father was a captain, Ruth replied. Died giving orders till his last breath. She learned from him how to lead, how to organize, how to keep people alive when everything's falling apart. She handed me a cup. You asked why I'm telling you all this, why I'm showing you the deed. You assumed we need you to save us. Her eyes were sharp. We don't need saving, Mr. Caldwell. We need an ally, someone with resources and reputation who'll stand when we stand, someone Drummond can't dismiss as poor squatters. I sipped the coffee, strong, bitter, honest. I don't know if I can stop him, I said. Drummond has lawyers, has the land office in his pocket, has money. I can buy off the debt, maybe, but even then... Don't. Ruth's voice was firm. Don't buy it. That's what he wants. To bleed good men dry, then move to the next victim. We prove the land is ours. Prove the debt was paid. Make him answer for what he's done. Outside, Abel's hammer rang steady. Inside, Nora drew another letter in the sand. I thought about my breeding stock, 15 years of work, about the $2,000 Drummond might demand if I pushed him, about the walls I'd built around my heart, and whether they were protection or prison. All right, I said. We prove it. Together. Ruth nodded once, satisfied. Behind her, Nora looked up from her teaching, and for the first time, something like hope flickered across her face. Then Timmy coughed, and the sound of it filled the cabin like a bell tolling. I found Drummond at the saloon 3 days later. The room smelled of whiskey and tobacco, sawdust on the floor soaking up spilled drink and sight. He sat at a corner table, playing cards with 2 men I didn't recognize. Hired types, from the look of them. He glanced up as I approached, smiled like we were old friends. Caldwell, join us? Need a word. Private. He studied his cards, then folded. Gentlemen, excuse me. He stood, gestured toward the bar. Drink? No. We moved to a quieter corner. Through the window, I could see the street, frozen mud, a few people hurrying through cold. Normal life, while I negotiated for children's survival. I'll buy Abel's debt, I said. $310. Cash. Today. Drummond's eyebrows rose. Generous, but I'm afraid the situation has evolved. Evolved. Market conditions. He sipped his whiskey. That land, once the railroad comes through next year, it'll be worth considerably more. Access to water, timber, level ground for track. I've done the surveys. My jaw tightened. How much? $2,000. The number hit like a fist. 2,000 would mean selling my breeding stock. 5 years of careful selection, bloodlines I'd worked to establish. Everything I'd built since my son died. You knew, I said slowly. You knew about Abraham's land grant all along. I knew Abraham was a drunk and a liar. Drummond's smile never wavered. That deed's a forgery, Caldwell. Pretty one, I'll admit, but still a forgery. Any judge will see that. So prove it's false. Don't have to. Burden of proof is on them. To prove it's genuine, properly filed, legally binding. He leaned back. Which they can't do, because Abraham Whitlock died before registration, because widow testimony means nothing, because those children are squatting on territorial land that I now legally own. You bought stolen land. I bought unclaimed land through proper channels. His voice hardened. And I'll have them out by March, frozen or not, unless you'd like to pay $2,000 for the privilege of saving them. I wanted to hit him, wanted to break that smug face against the bar, watch his perfect teeth shatter, but violence was his game, not mine. He'd have the law on his side within minutes. I'll think about it, I said. Don't think too long. Offer expires when the snow melts. He turned back to his card game, dismissing me. I rode back to the Whitlock cabin, blind with rage. $2,000. Might as well have asked for the moon. The scene that met me stopped my heart. Abel's horse, the old gray mare that had been Abraham's, that had survived the war and 20 Wyoming winters, lay in the snow 30 yards from the cabin. Shot through the head, blood spreading across white like spilled ink. The children huddled inside. Nora stood in the doorway, rifle in her hands, face pale but set. Abel knelt beside the horse, one hand on its neck. He wasn't crying, just kneeling there, staring. When? I asked. Hour ago. Nora's voice was flat. 3 men said the horse was trespassing on Drummond's land, said if we weren't gone by March, next bullet would be for us. Ruth emerged, put a blanket around Abel's shoulders. He didn't move. I dismounted, walked to where he knelt. The horse's eye was still open, glazed with death. It had been a good animal, patient, steady, the kind that carries children gently. I'll report this, I said. Sheriff can't ignore. Sheriff? Nora's laugh was sharp, broken. Sheriff's in Drummond's pocket, same as everyone else. You think he'll arrest a man for shooting a trespassing horse? I looked at her, at this 11-year-old girl holding a rifle like she knew how to use it, at the younger children pressed against the window, watching their grandfather mourn the last piece of their father. You can't save us, Mr. Caldwell. Her voice cracked, but she didn't lower the rifle. Rich men don't save poor children. They buy us or bury us. That's all we've ever been good for, labor or graves. The words hit harder than Drummond's price had. Nora, go home. She stepped back inside, shut the door. The sound of the bolt sliding into place echoed like a gunshot. I stood in the snow beside Abel. The old man finally spoke, voice rough as gravel. That horse carried Abraham home from the war, carried my grandchildren when they were babies, carried supplies when we had nothing else. His hand trembled on the dead animal's neck. She didn't deserve this. No, I agreed. She didn't. We buried the horse that afternoon. Took 4 hours to dig through frozen ground. Abel worked, despite his shaking hands, despite Ruth's protests. The children watched from the window. When we finished, Abel stood at the grave, hat in hand. Her name was Patience, he said, because that's what she had, more than any of us. That night, I sat in my own house, warm, solid, empty, and did the arithmetic. My breeding stock would fetch maybe $1,800 at spring auction if I was lucky. I'd need to borrow the rest, mortgage the ranch, everything I'd built since my son died, everything I'd used to wall off the world, gone, for 7 children who weren't mine, for an old couple I'd known 3 weeks, for a girl who'd spit at my boots and told me rich men only buy or bury. I pulled out my ledger, started calculating how much I could borrow, how long to pay it back, what I'd have left if I sold everything. The answer came up the same every time. Not enough. Even if I gave everything, even if I bankrupted myself, Drummond would win. Because he had the law, had the papers, had the system built to protect men like him from people like us. I closed the ledger, stared at the cold fireplace. In my mind, I saw Nora's face as she'd told me the truth, that I couldn't save them. Saw Abel kneeling in blood-stained snow, saw Timmy coughing himself toward a grave, saw my son's face 8 years old the last time I'd held him. I'd failed him, failed my wife, built walls so high I couldn't see over them anymore. But maybe, I could fail differently this time. I went to bed with no answers, just the knowledge that March 1st was 6 weeks away, and a little girl had looked me in the eye and told me exactly what she expected from men like me. Nothing. I rode down at dawn. The cabin door was still bolted. I knocked, waited. Ruth opened it a crack, suspicion in her eyes. Came to talk to Abel, I said. And Nora, if she'll listen. Ruth studied me, then stepped aside. Inside, the children were eating porridge, thin but hot. Nora sat at the far end of the table, not eating. She didn't look at me. Abel stood by the fire, hands wrapped around a cup. The trembling was worse today. I can't buy Drummond's debt, I said. No point in softening it. $2,000 is more than I have without selling everything, and even then, it wouldn't be enough. Nora's laugh was bitter. Told you. But, I continued, meeting her eyes, I can keep you alive until April, until Judge Coates arrives, give you shelter, food, wages for work, keep you out of Drummond's reach long enough to fight proper. Charity, Abel muttered. Work, I corrected. Ruth cooks, you smith, children do chores. $5 a week total. You keep your pride, I keep my conscience. And come April, we show that deed to a judge who might actually care about honor. And if the judge sides with Drummond? Ruth asked quietly. Then we've lost nothing we weren't losing anyway. I looked at each of them. But if we don't try, if you freeze here out of pride, or I let you freeze out of cowardice, then Drummond wins before the fight even starts. Silence. The fire crackled. One of the younger children coughed. Finally, Abel set down his cup. We'd need to pack. Pack what you need. Leave the rest. We'll come back for it. Nora stood abruptly, chair scraping. Why are you doing this? The question again, demanding truth I didn't want to give. Because I buried a son once, I said, and I spent 15 years building walls so I'd never hurt like that again. Bought land instead of making friends, bred cattle instead of having family, built a fortress and called it a life. I looked at her. Won't watch children freeze if I can stop it. Not again. She held my gaze, searching for lies. Found none. It's temporary, she said finally. We're not staying. Understood. And I won't beg. We work for what we get. Wouldn't expect less. She nodded once, then moved to help the younger ones gather their things. Ruth began packing with practiced efficiency. Only what mattered, nothing wasted. By mid-morning, we had them loaded in my wagon. 7 children, 2 elders, everything they owned in 3 crates and 4 bundles. I took a last look at the cabin. Crooked, cold, barely standing, but it was theirs. Abraham's, worth fighting for. The ride to my ranch took an hour. The children stared as we approached, at the big house, the solid barn, the fences that didn't sag, at wealth they'd never touched. Inside, Ruth's breath caught. I'd kept the place clean, but empty. Now it would be full. Bunkhouse has 4 beds, I said. Not enough, but we'll make do. Main house has 2 spare rooms. Ruth, you and the youngest 3 take those, Abel and the older boys in the bunkhouse. Nora, I hesitated. I'll stay with the boys, she said. Keep watch. Of course she would. Soldiers don't leave their post. That afternoon I showed Nora the cattle pens, explained the work, feeding, mucking, mending fence. She listened, asked sharp questions. The other children scattered like birds, exploring, their voices strange in spaces used to silence. This mark, I said, heating a branding iron in the forge, means protection on the range. Everyone knows these cattle are mine. Won't steal them, won't touch them. I pressed the iron to a fence post, my brand, the Caldwell Double C. The wood hissed, smoke curling. Like a signature? She asked. Like a promise. I held the iron out. You try. She took it, careful of the heat. Her first attempt was clumsy. The letters NWU burned crooked into the wood. She frowned at the imperfection. It's good, I said. Means something now, proof you were here. She traced the letters with her finger, not quite smiling. My father used to sign letters that way, Captain N. Whitlock. Ma said he was particular about his penmanship. Was he? Don't remember much, just the uniform, the way he stood even when sitting. She set the iron aside. He died slow. Took 6 years from the time he came home till the time he left again. Ma died having Timmy, so now it's just us. The afternoon sun slanted through barn slats. Dust motes danced in the light. Somewhere Ruth's voice called children to wash up for supper. Reckon you're decent after all, Nora said quietly. I looked at her, at this fierce, broken girl trying so hard to be a soldier. Still getting there, I admitted. She nodded, picked up the iron again. Teach me to do it right. If we're working for you, might as well learn proper. So I did. Showed her how to heat the metal just so, how to press firm but quick, how to read the color of the glow. Her second attempt was better, third, better still. By the time the dinner bell rang, she'd burned 6 practice marks into scrap wood, each one clearer than the last. Good work, I said. She looked at me then, really looked, and something shifted. Not trust, not yet, but the possibility of it, the first crack in her armor. Thank you, she said. 2 words, quiet as prayer. You're welcome. We walked to the house together. Inside, 7 children crowded around a table that had sat empty too long. Ruth ladled stew, real stew, with meat, and the younger ones ate like they couldn't believe it was real. Abel sat by the fire, his hands still trembling, but less now. Maybe the warmth helped. Maybe hope did. I sat at the head of the table and looked at all of them. My fortress, invaded. My walls, cracked. And for the first time in 15 years, the silence didn't feel like safety. It felt like loneliness ending. Town was colder than the weather when I rode in for supplies 2 weeks later. Mrs. Hattie at the general store moved like she was handling something diseased when she measured flour. "Heard you're harboring runaways," she said, not looking at me. "Drummond's their legal guardian, you know." "Drummond's a thief," I replied. "And they're working for wages, not hiding," she sniffed. "Town sees it different. Man who interferes in legal matters, well, that's a man folks might not want to do business with." I paid in silence, loaded the wagon. At the feed store, same treatment. The owner weighed grain with his mouth pressed thin, counted coins twice like he expected me to cheat him. At the bank, it got worse. "Mr. Caldwell." Manager Harrison barely looked up from his ledger. "I'm afraid we can't extend your usual credit this month." "Why not?" "Bank policy. Can't loan to men involved in legal disputes." He adjusted his spectacles. "Creates risk, you understand. I've banked here 15 years, never missed a payment. Nevertheless," he closed the ledger with a snap, "perhaps once your situation resolves." I understood then. Drummond wasn't just attacking the Whitlocks. He was attacking me, cutting off credit, poisoning reputation, forcing bankruptcy so I couldn't fight. Trap within trap within trap. Outside, Jake Morrison was tying his horse. He'd ranched the next valley over for 20 years. Solid man, honest. "Caldwell," he nodded. "Got a minute?" We walked away from listening ears. Jake pulled a flask, offered it. I shook my head. "Heard what you're doing," he said. "For those kids. Takes sand. Takes stupidity, probably." "Maybe." He smiled. "Tom Yates and I been talking. Got 5 other ranchers interested. We're pledging $200 each, $1,400 total, to help you buy that debt. If you can prove Drummond's dirty..." The words hit like sun through clouds. "Why?" "Because we've watched him swallow half the county like a snake eating legs. Someone's got to choke him eventually." Jake took a swig from his flask. "But Caldwell, we need proof. Real proof. Can't just be your word against his lawyers." "Working on it. Work faster. March 1st's 2 weeks out." That night, I found Tom Yates at the saloon. He was deep in his cups, celebrating a new foal. At the next table, a man I didn't know was deeper still, young, maybe 30, with surveyor's tools leaning against the wall. "Another round," the surveyor announced, slurring. "Drummond pays good, real good, for honest work." His companions laughed. One said, "Honest? That what you're calling it?" "Correcting maps," the surveyor declared, standing unsteady. "Old maps got mistakes. I fix 'em. Move a boundary marker here, adjust a line there. Drummond paid me $50 to make everything proper." The table went quiet. The surveyor kept talking, oblivious. "Whitlock cabin used to be 6 feet east of the line. Now it's 6 feet west, on Drummond's land, legal and proper." He tapped his nose. "That's craftsmanship." Tom Yates caught my eye, nodded toward the door. Outside, cold air hit like a slap. Tom kept his voice low. "You hear that?" I heard. "Pete Lawson, county surveyor, drunk as a pig and twice as stupid." Tom grinned. "That's your proof, Caldwell. He just confessed to fraud. His word against Drummond's, and he'll sober up by morning, deny everything." "Maybe." Tom's grin widened. "But drunk men tell truths. And if those old survey stakes still exist, the real ones from when Abraham filed, they'd prove Pete moved the boundaries." Hope stirred, dangerous. They'd be buried. 20 years of dirt and weather. Spring thaw's coming early this year. Creek's already rising from snowmelt, might wash away enough dirt to show what's underneath. I thought about it. About iron stakes driven deep in 1867. About how metal doesn't lie, doesn't change with ink and lawyers. Where would they be? According to Abraham's map, Creek Bend, where the lightning-struck pine stands, that's the northwest corner. Other 3 corners radiate from there. The lightning-struck pine. I'd seen it. Dead trunk, split down the middle, still standing like a grave marker. "We'd need witnesses," I said. Can't just find stakes and claim victory. Drummond would say we planted them fresh. Get Jake, me, and a few others, neutral parties, and that old blacksmith, Abel. His hands shake too bad to forge new stakes, right? That proves he couldn't fake evidence. The pieces aligned. Plant number 2, paying off exactly as needed. Tomorrow, I decided. Soon as there's light. Tom nodded. I'll bring Jake and 3 others. You bring Abel and anyone else you trust. Inside the saloon, Pete Lawson was still drinking, still bragging. By morning, he'd remember nothing. But Tom and I would remember everything. I rode home through darkness, mind racing. The creek was rising. I'd seen it myself. Spring coming early, thaw beginning, nature undoing what men tried to hide. At the ranch, lamplight glowed in the windows. Inside, Nora was reading to the younger children, a battered book of folk tales Ruth had salvaged. Her voice carried through the walls, steady and strong. Abel sat by the fire, tools laid out. He was repairing a bridle, fingers moving slow but sure through familiar work. When he saw me, he looked up. Something's changed, he said, not a question. Maybe. I hung my coat. Creek's rising. Might expose the old survey stakes, the ones from Abraham's original filing, if they're still there. His hand stilled. When? Tomorrow. Dawn. I'll need you there. Why? Because your hands shake. Because that proves you couldn't forge new stakes even if you wanted to. I met his eyes. Because you're the witness that makes the truth true. He looked at his trembling fingers. For years, that shake had been weakness, war wounds stealing his strength. Now it would be evidence, proof of honesty. I'll be ready, he said quietly. Ruth appeared in the doorway, flower on her apron. She'd heard everything. If you find those stakes, she said, Drummond will fight harder. He'll know we can prove fraud. I know. He'll come for us, for the children. I know that too. She nodded, accepting. Then we'd better win. That night, Nora found me on the porch. I'd come out to escape the noise. 7 children in a house built for silence made chaos of the quiet. She sat beside me without asking, pulled her coat tight. Timmy asked if we're staying forever, she said. Stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant. I told him no. We never stay anywhere. You could. The words came before I'd thought them through. If we win. She turned to face me. In the lamplight from the window, her eyes were too old for her face. Men like you don't adopt girls like me. You'll send us to an institution when this is over, or find some other family, respectable people who want children. The accusation stung because it held truth I hadn't examined. What happened after? If we won, if the land stayed theirs, if Drummond went to prison, what then? Did I send them back to a cabin that barely stood? Did I keep paying wages until they were grown? I wouldn't, I started. My father said that too. Her voice cracked. Said we'd always have a home, that he'd never leave. Then he died. Took 6 years, dying by inches, but he left all the same. She stood. Everyone leaves. At least you're honest enough not to promise different. She went inside before I could answer. The door closed soft, final. I sat alone, the porch boards cold beneath me. Pulled out the locket I'd carried for 15 years, my wife's face on one side, my son's on the other, both gone. Both left behind, because I'd been too buried in work to save a marriage. Too slow to catch a boy falling from a horse. I'd built walls to keep grief out, built them so high I couldn't see that I was the one imprisoned. The door opened. Ruth stepped out, 2 cups in hand. She offered one, coffee, strong and bitter. She doesn't mean it, Ruth said. The hardness. She means every word. Yes, Ruth sipped her coffee. But not the way you think. She's not angry you'll leave. She's angry she wants you to stay. Easier to keep walls up than risk them breaking again. I looked at her. This old woman, who'd taken in 7 children, who'd documented every penny in neat columns, who'd loved a war-broken man until his last breath. How do you do it? I asked. Keep loving when everything gets taken away? By remembering what love's for. She set her cup on the railing. Not to keep, to give. Abraham didn't survive the war so he could stay safe. He survived so he could come home and plant something that would outlast him, the land, the children, the deed hidden in a Bible. Her voice softened. Love isn't about holding on, it's about what you leave behind. Inside, a child laughed. Another shushed them, normal sounds of family. I don't know how, I admitted. To be that, a father, a family, I failed at it once already. Good, Ruth said. Then you know what not to do. She went inside, leaving me with coffee and stars and the weight of truth I'd avoided for 15 years. Dawn came gray and cold. The creek had risen another foot overnight, brown water churning with snowmelt. Jake Morrison arrived with Tom Yates and 3 other ranchers. Witnesses, all of them men whose word carried weight. Abel climbed down from the wagon, his hands shaking worse in the cold. Nora had come too, silent and watchful. We waded into the shallows where the lightning-struck pine marked the corner. The water bit through boots, numbed toes. Jake had brought iron rods for probing. There, Abel said, pointing to a spot 6 feet from the bank. Abraham drove the stake deep, 3 feet down, said corners had to be solid or the whole claim would shift. We probed, once, twice. The third strike hit metal with a clean ring. Got something, Tom grunted. We dug around it, hands plunging into freezing mud. The stake emerged slowly, square iron, hand-forged, stamped with numbers and letters. 1867, Jake read, scraping away rust. A. Whitlock, northwest corner. The other 3 corners went faster. Each stake matched, same year, same surveyor's mark, same hand-forged iron that Abel's shaking hands couldn't have made fresh. This proves it, one of the ranchers said. Drummond's maps are fraud. He moved the lines. We stood in the creek, water soaking through wool, and I felt something like hope. Real hope. Not the desperate kind. Ruth needs to document this, I said. Every detail. Witnesses, measurements, stake positions. Back at the ranch, Ruth worked with the precision of a military quartermaster. Her ledger filled with notes. Time, date, weather conditions, 6 witness names, exact measurements from tree to stakes to creek bank. She drew diagrams, recorded the stamped dates, noted Abel's trembling hands and why that mattered. This is evidence, she said, closing the book. Legal evidence. Judge Coates will see it. Nora watched from the doorway. When Ruth finished, the girl approached, touched the ledger with careful fingers. Will it be enough? She asked. It has to be, Ruth replied. That afternoon, a rider came hard from town. Young boy, maybe 14, horse-lathered. Message from Judge Coates, he gasped. Coming April 5th, creek trial at the boundary. Bring your evidence. April 5th, 2 weeks after Drummond's debt deadline. 2 weeks to survive whatever he'd throw at us when he learned about the stakes. I paid the boy, sent him off, looked at the faces gathered on the porch, Ruth, Abel, Nora, 6 younger children, Jake and Tom still present. He'll know by tonight, Jake said. Pete Lawson's got a big mouth. Once word spreads, we found stakes, Drummond will move. Let him, I said. We're ready. But I wasn't sure. Wasn't sure of anything except that I'd committed now, fully, completely. No walls left to hide behind. That evening, Nora found me in the barn. I was checking the horses, doing work that didn't need doing. I'm sorry, she said, for what I said last night, when you weren't wrong. Wasn't right either. She leaned against a stall. Ruth says love's about what you leave behind, not what you keep. I looked at her. Your grandmother's a wise woman. She says you're scared, same as me, that if we care too much, it'll hurt worse when it ends. She's right about that too. Nora was quiet for a moment. Then, maybe it's worth it anyway. The hurt, if it means not being alone first. I had no answer to that, just the ache in my chest where walls used to be. Stakes are real, she said. Drummond can't fake his way out of iron and rust and 20 years of dirt. No, I agreed. He can't. So we might actually win. We might. She smiled then, small, fragile, but real. Good, because Timmy asked again if we're staying, and I didn't tell him no this time. She left before I could respond, left me standing in the barn with horses and hope and the terrifying possibility that family wasn't something you were born into. It was something you chose, every day, despite the fear. Outside, the creek rushed past, carrying winter away. Spring coming early, change arriving whether we were ready or not. April 5th came with clear skies and a crowd. 50 people, maybe more, gathered at the creek bend where the lightning-struck pines stood sentinel. Ranchers, townspeople, shopkeepers. Everyone who had a stake in watching power face truth. Judge Hiram Coates sat on a wagon tailgate that served as bench. He was 61, weathered as the territory itself, with eyes that missed nothing. His law books lay stacked beside him, but I suspected he'd decide this case by older codes. Drummond arrived with 2 lawyers in Eastern suits, They carried leather cases fat with documents, moved with the confidence of men who'd never lost. We had Ruth's ledger and 4 iron stakes laid on a blanket. "This court will hear the matter of land ownership," Judge Coates announced, voice carrying across the creek. "Mr. Drummond claims legal purchase of territorial land. The Whitlock family claims prior homestead rights. Proceed." Drummond's lead lawyer stood. His name was Carlton, and his voice was smooth as creek stones. "Your Honor, the facts are simple. My client legally purchased unclaimed territorial land through proper channels. The Whitlock family's alleged claim rests on an unregistered deed of dubious authenticity, produced only when eviction became imminent. He spread maps across the tailgate. New maps, clean and official. These surveys, conducted by certified territorial surveyor Peter Lawson, clearly show the cabin in question sits on land that was never properly filed as homestead. The so-called deed," he held up Abraham's document like something diseased, "lacks proper registration, verification, or legal standing." "Mr. Caldwell?" The judge looked at me. I stood. My hands were steadier than I'd expected. "Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that Mr. Drummond's surveys are fraudulent." I gestured to the stakes. "These are the original boundary markers, driven in 1867 by Abraham Whitlock. They prove the cabin sits on legitimately claimed land." Carlton smiled. "Convenient. Stakes that appear exactly when needed. Your Honor, anyone could forge those." "Not anyone," I said. "Abel Whitlock, please stand." Abel rose from where he sat with Ruth, walked to the front. His hands trembled visibly, worse in the cold, worse under the eyes of 50 witnesses. "Mr. Whitlock," I said, "can you forge iron stakes?" "Not anymore." His voice was rough. "Shrapnel in my spine. Hands shake too bad for fine work. Can barely hold a hammer steady." "Could you have forged these stakes in the last month?" "No, sir." I turned to Judge Coates. 6 witnesses watched us unearth these stakes. They'd been buried 20 years. Rust patterns prove that. The dates stamped match Abraham Whitlock's original deed, and the man accused of faking them couldn't hold a hammer straight if his life depended on it. Carlton's smile faded. "Your Honor, this proves nothing. The stakes could have been planted years ago, in anticipation." "Of what?" I cut him off. "Of a land speculator buying territorial rights 20 years later? Of legal battles Abraham Whitlock didn't live to see?" I picked up one of the stakes. "Iron doesn't lie, Mr. Carlton. Rust doesn't forge itself, and these stakes match the survey marks on a deed signed in 1867. Judge Coates examined the stakes, running his fingers over the stamped dates. "Continue, Mr. Caldwell." "We have additional evidence." I nodded to Ruth. "Mrs. Whitlock." Ruth stepped forward, ledger in hand. She opened it to marked pages. "Every debt payment to Mr. Drummond," she said, voice clear. "Documented by date, amount, and form. $240 paid in goods and labor between 1884 and 1888. She turned pages. "And here, territorial orphan stipends. $2 per child per month. 7 children. Mr. Drummond claimed guardianship and collected $14 monthly for 18 months. $252 he pocketed while those children starved." The crowd murmured. Drummond's face went rigid. Carlton tried to recover. "Ledger entries aren't legal proof." "Dr. Annabelle Cross," Judge Coates said. "You're present?" Doc Cross stood from the crowd. "I am, Your Honor." "You can verify the stipend claim?" "I can. I treated those children for malnutrition and pneumonia while Mr. Drummond collected guardian payments. He never provided care, shelter, or food." The murmuring grew louder. I saw calculation in Drummond's eyes the moment he realized the ground was shifting. "Your Honor," Carlton said desperately, "the debt is a separate matter from land ownership." "Is it?" Judge Coates's voice was sharp. "When the same man uses debt to force eviction from land he claims to own, when he collects payments meant for children's care, while demanding payment for fabricated debts?" He looked at Drummond. "Mr. Drummond, did you alter survey boundaries?" "Your Honor, yes or no." Drummond's jaw worked. His lawyers whispered urgently. "I purchased land legally." "That's not what I asked." Silence. The creek rushed past. 50 people held their breath. "Peter Lawson adjusted certain boundaries," Drummond said finally, "to reflect accurate measurements." "Adjusted." Judge Coates's tone could have cut steel. "Is that what we're calling fraud now?" "Your Honor, I've heard enough." The judge stood. "The evidence is clear. Abraham Whitlock filed legitimate homestead claim in 1867. The The cabin sits on his land. The debt in question was paid in full. Mrs. Whitlock's ledger is more reliable than Mr. Drummond's convenient contracts, and the stipend fraud is criminal." And he looked at Drummond with something like disgust. "Land ownership is hereby confirmed to the Whitlock heirs. The debt is void. Mr. Drummond, you're under arrest for fraud, contract tampering, and child endangerment. Sheriff, take him." The sheriff, who'd avoided my eyes for weeks, stepped forward reluctantly, snapped iron cuffs on Drummond's wrist. "This isn't—" Drummond started. "It's over," Judge Coates said. "And if I hear you've threatened these children again, I'll add witness intimidation to the charges." The crowd erupted. Some cheered, others whispered. Jake Morrison clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to bruise, but I was watching Nora. She stood beside Ruth, perfectly still, her father's medal pinned to her coat, catching sunlight. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate, just watched as Drummond was led away, watched justice arrive 20 years late. When it was done, when the lawyers had packed their cases and the judge had signed papers and the crowd had dispersed, she walked to where I stood. "You were braver than any man here today," I said. She looked up at me. "I learned from you." The words hit like an unexpected gift. "We should go home," she said, then softer. "To the ranch, not the cabin. Not yet. The cabin's yours now, legal and proper." "I know." She took my hand, first time she'd done that. Her fingers were small, cold. "But home's where you choose to be. Ruth said so, and I'm choosing the ranch, if that's allowed." My throat tightened. "That's allowed." "Good." She squeezed my hand once, then let go. "Because Timmy still asks every day if we're staying, and I'm tired of not knowing the answer." Behind us, Ruth and Abel were loading into the wagon. The younger children climbed in, chattering about the trial, about stakes and judges and justice. Nora walked toward them, stopped, looked back. "Thank you," she said. 2 words that carried everything: for fighting, for staying, for teaching her that walls could come down without everything collapsing. "You're welcome," I replied. She smiled, genuine, unguarded, then climbed into the wagon. As we rode away from the creek, I looked back once. The lightning-struck pines still stood, marking the corner where Abraham Whitlock had staked his claim, where his daughter had staked hers, where I had learned that family wasn't something you lost and mourned forever. It was something you built, stake by stake, day by day, even when your hands shook, even when you'd failed before, especially then. The town watched as Sheriff led Drummond through the street. People lined the boardwalks, silent at first, then not. Mrs. Hattie stepped off her store porch, spit at Drummond's feet as he passed. "You stole from children," she said, voice carrying, "while you sat in church, pretending piety." The bank manager, Harrison, stared at his shoes, wouldn't meet Drummond's eyes. The land office clerk had disappeared entirely. Smart man, probably already running. Drummond kept his head up, tried to maintain dignity, but his expensive coat was mud-stained now, his polished boots scuffed. He looked smaller somehow, like the trial had physically diminished him. At the jail, he turned once, found me in the crowd. "You'll regret this, Caldwell," he said. "No heat in it, just exhaustion." "I regret not acting sooner," I replied. The cell door clanged shut. The sound echoed down the street, final as a judge's gavel. 3 days later, we gathered at the ranch for what Jake Morrison called settling accounts. The ranchers who'd pledged money came, 7 of them, plus Doc Cross, plus Judge Coates, who'd stayed to ensure the transition was legal. "Lands confirmed to the Whitlock heirs," the judge said, papers spread on my kitchen table. "Water rights reinstated, all debts void." He looked at Ruth and Abel. "You're free and clear." Ruth nodded, but her face was troubled. "The cabin needs work. Roof's half collapsed, walls are rotting, winter nearly killed it." "We'll rebuild," Abel said. His hands shook as he signed the deed transfer into Ruth's name. Widows could own property once a judge said so. "Come spring proper, we'll, Or," I interrupted. Both of them looked at me. "You stay here. Merge operations. Your land, my resources. Shared water rights, shared work. You keep the cabin as landmark, but live here, with me." The room went quiet. Nora stood in the doorway, listening. The younger children had pressed close, understanding something important was happening. "That's a lot to ask," Ruth said carefully. "It's not asking, it's offering." I looked at each of them. "I've got land I can't work alone. You've got family that needs stability. We brand together, your cattle with my mark, my cattle with yours, make it official." "Adoption, cowboy style," Jake said, grinning. "I like it." Abel's jaw worked. pride warring with practicality. Finally, what's the split, profit-wise? Even, I said. 50-50. You work, I work. Money goes into one account. We build from there. Ruth pulled out her ledger. Of course she did, and started calculating. After a minute, she looked up. That's more than fair, Mr. Caldwell. Garrett, I corrected. And it's not charity. I need you, all of you. I met Nora's eyes. This place has been empty too long. Needs family to make it work. Nora stepped forward, pulled something from her pocket. Her father's medal, the one I'd picked up that first night in the barn. He'd want you to have this, she said, holding it out. I took it carefully. The medal was warm from her pocket, worn smooth at the edges. Abraham Whitlock, 14th Infantry, Shiloh. No, I said, handing it back. You keep it, but I'd like to add my brand beside it, make it official. How? I led them outside to the forge. Heated 2 branding irons, mine and the old Whitlock iron Abel had brought from the cabin, the one with the simple W Abraham had designed. Your father earned land with this, I said to Nora, showing her the Whitlock brand. My grandfather started my ranch with this. I showed her my double C. Now we make them one. I brought out the 6 cattle we'd saved from the Whitlock place. Scrawny things, but alive. Abel and I worked together, heating my iron white hot. I pressed it to the first cow's flank. The double C burned clear, smoke curling. Caldwell Protection, I said. Anyone sees this brand knows she's under my shield. Then Abel heated his iron, hands shaking, but Tom Yates steadied him. Together they branded 4 of my prime calves with the Whitlock W. Whitlock honor, Abel said, voice rough. Anyone sees this knows the animals earned respect. The children watched, solemn. Even Timmy, who was only 4, understood this was ceremony. This was binding. When the last brand cooled, Nora approached me. She unpinned her father's medal, then pinned it to my vest. Not giving it away, she said. I'm sharing it. Like you're sharing everything else. I looked down at the medal, at this piece of Abraham Whitlock that his daughter trusted me to carry. My chest felt too tight, too full. Thank you, I managed. She stepped back, then forward again, quickly. Hugged me, fast, fierce, then gone before I could respond. But the gesture remained, warm as a brand. That evening, we gathered on the porch. All of us, Ruth, Abel, 7 children, me. The ranch hands had joined too, curious about the family that had appeared in their bunkhouse. To new beginnings, Jake Morrison said, raising a cup of Ruth's cider. We drank, even the children, to their delight. Timmy climbed into my lap, uninvited and entirely sure of his welcome. Are we staying forever now? He asked. I looked at Nora. She nodded, almost imperceptible. Yes, I said. Forever. Good. He settled against my chest, thumb in his mouth. 'Cause I like it here. The simplicity of it nearly broke me. A 4-year-old's approval, earned through warm beds and full meals, and the radical act of not leaving. As the sun set, painting the mountains golden red, I felt something shift. Not the walls coming down. They were already gone. This was different. This was foundation, the kind you build family on. Garrett, Ruth said quietly, Abraham would have liked you. Stubborn men recognize each other. Was he stubborn? Stubborn enough to survive Shiloh. Stubborn enough to homestead alone. Stubborn enough to love me even when I told him he was a fool for trying. She smiled. Same kind of stubborn that makes a rancher take in 7 orphans and fight a man with lawyers. Reckon that's a compliment. Reckon it is. Later, after the children were asleep and the house had finally quieted, I walked out to the fence where Nora had burned her practice brands. The crooked NWO was still there, permanent as promise. Below it, I burned a new mark, not the Caldwell double C or the Whitlock W, just 2 letters, CW, together, equal, Caldwell Whitlock Ranch. I heard footsteps. Nora appeared, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Couldn't sleep? I asked. Wanted to make sure. She looked at the fence post, at the merged brand. That it was real, that tomorrow won't come and change things back. It's real. You promise? I looked at her, at this girl who'd spit at my boots and called me cruel, who'd taught me that walls were prisons, not protection, who'd chosen to trust when trust had been beaten out of her. I promise, I said. By God's mercy and man's labor, I promise. She nodded, satisfied, started back to the house, then paused. Reckon you're decent after all, Mr. Caldwell, Most reckon you made me that way, Miss Whitlock. She smiled, full, genuine, unguarded, and disappeared inside. I stood alone under stars that had watched this land for longer than memory. Thought about Abraham Whitlock, who'd earned 160 acres with blood and filed a claim that wouldn't pay off for 20 years after his death. Thought about the children sleeping inside, finally safe. Thought about the metal pinned to my vest, warm against my heart. Family wasn't something you were born into. It was something you earned, something you built, something you chose, every day, despite the fear, maybe especially because of it. The creek rushed past in the darkness, carrying winter away, spring arriving, new things growing where old things had died. I went inside to sleep. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't check the locks twice, didn't walk through empty rooms counting absences. The house was full now, and I was home. 15 years have passed since that spring. I'm 67 now, writing this from the same porch where Nora once told me rich men only buy or bury, where I learned she was wrong, or learned to prove her wrong, which amounts to the same thing. Nora runs the ranch now, married Jake Morrison's boy, gave me 3 grandchildren I never earned but love fierce anyway. She still wears her father's medal on Sundays, polished bright. Still burns her brand crooked on purpose, says it reminds her where she came from. Abel passed in 92. Hands finally gave out, but not before he taught every child in the valley to smith. We buried him on the ridge, overlooking the creek, next to the lightning-struck pine. Ruth followed in 95, ledger book in her lap, every penny still accounted for. They rest together now, under a stone that reads, Whitlock. They kept their promises. Drummond served 8 years. Came out broken, worked washing dishes in Laramie last I heard. Some men never learn that you can't buy honor, can't steal dignity, that the only wealth that matters is what you give away. The creek still runs clear every April, washing over those iron stakes Abel and I found. Whitlock land, Caldwell protection, same thing now. The cabin's been rebuilt. Nora uses it for storage, says tearing it down would dishonor her father's claim. I understand that. Some things are worth keeping even when they're not useful. Timmy's 20 now, training horses, lungs strong as leather. The pneumonia that nearly killed him left no trace. Doc Cross says it's a miracle. I say it's warmth, food, and love, the kind of medicine no bottle can hold. That branding iron with Nora's crooked NW burned into my fence post? Still there. I never sanded it off. Reminds me of the day a little girl taught me that broken men can hold more love than whole ones, if they're willing to be broken open. By God's mercy and man's labor, we built something that lasts, not because of law or money or land, because 7 children needed a home, and a lonely rancher needed to remember how to be a father. Spring water runs clear over those old survey stakes, always has, always will.